When the clock strikes midnight in Nero Wolfe's brownstone, peace should reign, but tonight the bell rings with betrayal and the scent of danger. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. Nero Wolfe and the detective who replaced Cramer. If you ever want to test your nerves, try sitting alone in Nero Wolfe's office at midnight with nothing but the ticking of the globe clock and your own guilty conscience for company. I didn't have the conscience, but I had the clock. I'd finished my notes on a routine divorce case, poured myself a ginger ale, and was congratulating civilization on inventing armchairs when the doorbell cut the peace like a razor. At that hour, the only people who ring Wolfe's bell are lunatics, policemen, or clients who can't tell time. I opened the door and got 2 out of 3. Lieutenant Pearlie Stebbins filled the doorway like a disgruntled refrigerator. He looked as if he'd been chewing gravel for dessert. Beside him stood a man 10 years younger and 50 pounds neater. Pressed grey suit, black tie, hair combed to a military grid, eyes that could frost beer. You could smell new authority on him, sharp and untested. "Evening, Goodwin," Pearlie grunted. "Or morning, whatever you call it when you're waking the dead. Meet Lieutenant Joe Talbot. He's taking over for Cramer." I'll give myself credit. I didn't drop the glass. "Replacing Cramer," I said. "That's like replacing the Empire State Building with a hat rack." "Cramer's suspended," Pearlie muttered. "Departmental inquiry." Talbot stepped forward. "May we come in?" He didn't wait for the invitation. That told me plenty. I shut the door behind them and led the parade to the office. The air smelled of Wolfe's cigars, Fritz's cocoa, and the faint ghost of orchids that had drifted down from upstairs. The big yellow globe lamp threw civilized light over Wolfe's empty chair. It looked indecent without him in it. Pearlie looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sorry to bust in," he said, "but Talbot here." Talbot cut him off with a voice as smooth as typewriter keys. "We've had an anonymous tip, Mr. Goodwin. Someone inside the department's been leaking restricted files to private operatives. One of the names mentioned was Nero Wolfe." That sentence had more chill than a morgue drawer. I grinned because my alternatives were homicide or laughter. "Well, that's original. Usually they accuse us of murder first." Talbot didn't blink. "Where is Mr. Wolfe?" "Abed, where decent geniuses belong. He doesn't meet strangers after hours unless they're burglars with engraved invitations." "You'll wake him," Talbot said. That was when I knew we weren't going to be friends. I went to the hall and let the elevator's whine announce what I was doing. When Wolfe's private cage stopped and he emerged in his maroon robe, the temperature in the room dropped another degree. His expression could have curdled milk, which, incidentally, I was considering drinking if the night got worse. He crossed to his chair, sat, and regarded Talbot as if he were an insect newly discovered, but not worth naming. "You are Lieutenant Joe Talbot, replacing Inspector Cramer." Wolfe's eyes half closed. "Replacing or supplanting?" "I'll let the Commissioner pick the verb," Talbot said. "My concern is a leak. This anonymous caller said case documents have been sold to private detectives, including a certain brownstone on 35th Street. "Indeed." Wolfe's tone could have sounded wood. "You have evidence?" "Not yet." "Then you have effrontery." Pearlie shifted uneasily. "We just came to clear the air, Mr. Wolfe." "The air was quite breathable before you entered it." Wolfe gestured toward the red chair opposite him. "Sit, if you must. You, Mr. Goodwin, remain standing. I dislike having you above me." I stayed standing out of spite. At midnight, my knees only bend for emergencies. Wolfe ignored me, as usual. "Lieutenant, if you suspect I have purchased information, specify it." Talbot's mouth tightened. "I'll specify when I've confirmed it. Until then, consider this a warning. Keep clear of departmental business." "Sir," Wolfe said, "I keep clear of most things. Disorder, cheap liquor, and the clamour of bureaucrats. Yet they persist in invading my home." He reached for the bell cord, tugged once. Fritz appeared, immaculate even at that hour, bearing a tray with cocoa and 3 cups. "For our guests, Fritz." Pearlie took a cup like a man accepting a subpoena. Talbot declined with a curt shake. "No thanks." "Pity," I said. Fritz's cocoa could reconcile Cain and Abel. Wolfe sipped his own with ceremony. "You spoke of a caller. Anonymous?" "Yes." "Then the charge is vapour. Come back when it condenses." Talbot's jaw flexed. "We'll see. You might be surprised who's under oath next week." "Phooey. Surprises for amateurs." Pearlie tried to intervene. "Come on, Joe. It's late." "I'm fine," Talbot said. "One more thing. If any of your operatives, Panther, Cather, Durkin, approach department personnel this week, they'll be cited for interference." I put in, "That's going to make poker night awkward." Talbot's gaze snapped to me. "This isn't a joke, Goodwin." "No, but it's competing with one." He turned back to Wolfe. "Good evening." "Hardly," Wolfe murmured. They left in a clatter of irritation. I shut the door, came back and watched Wolfe finish his cocoa in silence. The only sound was the clock again, ticking smugly like it had predicted this mess hours ago. Wolfe set down his cup. "Archie?" "Yes, sir?" "Your flippancy is a defense mechanism, useful yet occasionally misplaced. Sit." I sat. "You believe him?" "I believe in incompetence, envy, and political convenience. Those are the trinity of bureaucracy." "Meaning?" "Meaning someone desires Inspector Cramer's removal, and in the shuffle seeks to discredit me." "Nice of them to include you." He leaned back, eyes half closed. "This Talbot, describe him." "Neat, cold, polished shoes, unpolished manners, a climber who's found his first ladder." Wolfe's lips twisted. "A man eager to display zeal. That can be dangerous." I said, "He accused you of buying police files." He implied it. The distinction matters. Implication demands rebuttal, accusation, evidence. We shall offer neither. I grinned. "So we just wait for him to trip?" "Precisely. But in the meantime, we observe." He pulled the telephone pad toward him, a rare act of self-motion. "Tomorrow you will call Mr. Saul Panther. Have him determine what whisper preceded Cramer's suspension. Be discreet." "I'm always discreet. Ask anyone who hasn't caught me." His glance could have sliced marble. "Archie, your levity will one day earn you a contusion." "Only if you administer it yourself." He allowed himself the smallest exhale, which for Wolfe passed as affection. "I rely on you to manage the externals of this household, and to keep it from contamination by stupidity. Do not fail me." "I never do. I just innovate." He ignored that, which meant he'd heard it. For the next few minutes he dictated a short note to be filed, a formality stating that Lieutenant Talbot had visited at 12:17 a.m. and that no information had been exchanged. Wolfe dictated in that graveyard voice he used for contracts and menus. I typed it, carboned it, and slid the original into the safe. Procedure, the religion of our partnership. When the paperwork was done, I said, "You think Cramer's really dirty?" "Archie, you are not obtuse, but you enjoy pretending. Cramer is many things, obstinate, irascible, coarse, but corrupt. No, the very idea is slander." "Then who benefits?" "Who indeed? That is your assignment to learn." "While you sit here breathing intellect?" "While I think. Thinking is labour enough for two." I stretched. "All right, but if Talbot's as clean as his haircut, I'll eat Fritz's apron." "That would be barbarous. Go to bed." I didn't argue, but halfway to the door I turned. You know, if he planned to make friends, he should have started with Fritz's chocolate cake. Wolfe's eyelids opened halfway. "Mr. Talbot's digestion will not trouble me." "Maybe not, but mine will. This smells like a setup." He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Then we shall unsnare it, in our own time and on our own terms." That was the end of the conversation, because when Wolfe pronounces a period, it stays pronounced. He reached for the bell cord again, and Fritz reappeared with the quiet inevitability of sunrise. "The cocoa tray, Fritz, and retire." "Yes, Mr. Wolfe." As the Swiss disappeared, Wolfe rose with the grace of a battleship leaving port. "Tomorrow at 9, the Orchids," he said. "No visitors before 11. "Even if it's Cramer himself?" "If it is Cramer, he will understand punctuality." He started toward the elevator. I watched him disappear inside, the cage rising with its familiar hum. The sound faded into the ceiling, leaving me alone with the clock and the aftertaste of midnight trouble. I poured myself another ginger ale, something to celebrate not slugging Lieutenant Talbot, and jotted a note in the log. 12:53 a.m. Visit by Stebbins and Talbot re Cramer suspension. Corruption rumour. Implied accusation of Wolfe. Then I added, Wolfe calm. Archie sceptical. Outside, a taxi horn wailed down 35th Street like a sick trumpet. Inside, the brownstone felt as solid and self-righteous as ever, but I had a feeling we'd just been drafted into someone else's war. I shut the typewriter, killed the lights, and started upstairs. Tomorrow, orchids at 9, trouble at 10, and questions at 11. That's Nero Wolfe's idea of an agenda. And if Lieutenant Talbot thought he could keep the brownstone clear of department business, he'd learn something about civic cooperation the hard way, served cold, with Fritz's cocoa. If you ever want to see Manhattan pretending to be respectable, drop by our brownstone around 11 in the morning. That's when Fritz's breakfast aromas are still arguing with Wolfe's orchids, and the city outside is just getting ready to lie about being productive. I was in the office at 11:10, feet on the desk, reading the Chronicle's front page. It featured the kind of news that gives the police ulcers. Editor found dead, Metropolitan Chronicle in shock. I didn't know then that the paper's publisher was about to join our client list. I did know that Wolfe was upstairs with his orchids and would bite anyone who interrupted him before 11 sharp. That's when the doorbell buzzed, brisk, impatient, feminine. Fritz appeared from the dining room, immaculate as ever. "A lady, Mr. Goodwin," he said in that Swiss accent that makes lady sound like an event. "Tell her the boss is busy inventing new insults for aphids," I said, and went to the door myself. The woman on the stoop looked like a headline written by a nervous reporter, tall, blonde, expensive, and wound too tight, with a thin ribbon of lilac perfume that didn't match the weather. She had on a tailored navy suit that probably had its own bank account, and she held her handbag as if it might attack her. "I'm Claire Regan," she said, "publisher of the Metropolitan Chronicle. Mr. Wolfe must see me immediately." I gave her my best press-pass smile. "Miss Regan, Mr. Wolfe sees no one between 9 and 11 unless they're dead or flowering. You're neither. So come in and wait while I attempt the impossible." She entered like someone stepping onto thin ice. The office, with its comfortable clutter of books, globe, and Wolfe's overfed chair, seemed to shrink around her tension. She took in the room with a professional's eye, as if measuring column inches for scandal. "I've already spoken to the police," she said tightly. "They think it was a robbery gone wrong. But my editor, Robert Leith, was killed the same night Inspector Cramer was suspended. That can't be coincidence." I poured coffee from the side table and handed her a cup. "Coincidences happen, Miss Regan. For instance, my boss always gets hungry right when I finish typing a report. The universe has a sense of humour." She didn't smile. "Mr. Goodwin, please. My office received a call this morning warning me to keep quiet about the memo. I don't know what memo they meant, but the only one I can think of—" She broke off, bit her lip, and stared at the rug like it might help. I leaned forward. "Let me guess. A police document." Her eyes flashed up. "It was labelled confidential, internal affairs. My editor received it anonymously 2 nights ago. He said it implicated officers in bribery. I told him to take it to Inspector Cramer directly, but he said he'd verify first. The next day, he was dead." She was trembling, but not the fainting kind, more like a wire about to snap. I whistled low. "If that's the game, you're sitting on dynamite. Wolfe will want to light it carefully." "Then please, get him," I sighed. "He'll eat me alive for it, but all right." I went to the hall, pressed the elevator buzzer, and waited through the slow groan of machinery that always makes me think of Wolfe's metabolism. When the cage arrived, he descended like a prophet reluctantly answering a mortal summons, maroon robe, yellow silk ascot, and that expression reserved for unscheduled humanity. "Archie," he said, "if this is not a conflagration, you will regret the spark." "It's close enough," I said, "publisher of the Metropolitan Chronicle. Her editor got murdered. She thinks it's tied to Cramer's suspension. She's here, trembling artistically." He entered the office, saw Miss Regan, and inclined his head an inch. "Good morning, madam. I am occupied until 11. "It's 11:10, I said. He glared. Silence. He turned back to her. "You are in distress. Sit. Mr. Goodwin will procure coffee." "She's already on her second cup," I said, "then desist from redundancy and allow her to speak when I return." He vanished toward the plant rooms. Miss Regan blinked. He left? Don't take it personal, I said. He's allergic to crises before they're properly timed. I'll keep you entertained until he's cured. She tried a small, brittle smile. Is he always like that? Only on weekdays. While she waited, she talked, because silence is the most expensive luxury for a woman in fear. She told me how she'd taken over the Chronicle last year after her father's death, how Leith had been her mentor, how the staff was in panic since the murder. She'd been advised by the board to let the police handle it quietly, which she didn't trust one bit. I tossed in small quips to keep her anchored. You know, Miss Regan, for a newspaper woman, you're not giving much ink to your own story. She looked up sharply. Meaning? Meaning either you know more than you're saying, or you're afraid knowing it will make you headline number 2. Before she could reply, Wolfe re-entered, refreshed from his floral devotions and ready to dismantle civilization. He sat heavily behind his desk and laced his fingers. Miss Regan, you have until 12 minutes past to convince me this is worth my attention. Begin. She did, haltingly at first, then in clean paragraphs like a front-page rewrite. She described the anonymous packet, the memo with no signature, the missing watermark. Wolfe listened with the gravity of a Supreme Court judge tasting soup. When she finished, he asked, "The envelope, do you have it?" She opened her handbag with trembling hands and drew out a manila envelope marked Confidential, Internal Affairs. Inside were carbon copies of police reports, unsigned but on official-looking stationery. I took it gingerly and studied the pages. No watermark. "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said. "Note that absence." "Already noted," I said. "Paper's standard bond sold by the Ream downtown. Could have come from anywhere. The text uses departmental codes, though, genuine or very good fakes." Miss Regan's voice cracked slightly. "Mr. Wolfe, whoever killed Leith must think I have the original memo. If I don't find who sent it, I'll be next." Wolfe's eyes softened just enough to prove he was human. "Miss Regan, fear is not unbecoming, but hysteria is useless. You seek protection through clarity. That I can provide, for a fee." She exhaled in relief. "Whatever it takes." $10,000, he said calmly, in advance. "My condition, absolute candor. If you withhold a fact, you forfeit both money and confidence." She nodded, opened her purse again, and produced a cashier's check that could have funded my next vacation. Wolfe inspected it, nodded once, and slid it into a drawer. "Now," he said, "you will give Mr. Goodwin the names of everyone who knew of this memorandum before your editor's death." "There were 3, she said, "my managing editor, Hal Dent, our legal counsel, Mr. Jarvis, and myself." "None of whom," Wolfe murmured, "were robbed or assaulted." "No." Then robbery was pretext. Archie's contribution, as usual, was to poke. "And this Hal Dent, friend, enemy, or hopeful suitor?" She flushed. "He's ambitious. He wanted Leith's position." "That's informative," Wolfe said. "Ambition is a form of hunger. It rarely stops at bread." I jotted the names in my notebook and underlined Hal Dent. "You realize, Miss Regan, you just gave me my morning exercise." Wolfe frowned. "Archie, enough pollination." "Just planting leads," I said. He turned back to her. "You will, of course, refrain from discussing this consultation with anyone. If another warning arrives, inform Mr. Goodwin immediately. I shall determine whether this memorandum was authentic or contrived to discredit Inspector Cramer. Either way, its author is our quarry." She rose, visibly steadier now. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. I'll try to be careful." "Try harder," Wolfe advised. I escorted her to the door. She paused in the hall. "Mr. Goodwin, do you believe this will reach the truth?" "With Wolfe on the job, it'll reach something that pays rent," I said. "Truth comes free." When I returned, Wolfe was already dictating. "Archie, record this. Client Claire Regan, publisher, seeks identification of author and purpose of forged police memorandum. Fee, 10,000. Risk, indeterminate." "Got it," I said, fingers rattling the keys. "Want me to add, suspects include newsroom egos, legal sharks, and miscellaneous killers?" "You may annotate for your amusement privately." He leaned back, eyes half-lidded. "There is a faint odour of intrigue about this. A police scandal, an editor dead, Cramer suspended, and an ambitious subordinate. If coincidence exists, it has donned livery. I said, "You think Cramer's really mixed in?" "Pfui. He is obstinate, not venal. Someone uses his name as camouflage." "That makes our new friend Talbot happy," I muttered. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Lieutenant Talbot is a symptom, not a cause. His vigour suggests ignorance. Beware of men who mistake haste for virtue." I grinned. "That rules out most of New York." He ignored that and reached for the bell cord. Fritz appeared silently. "Lunch at 1, Wolfe said. "Yes, Mr. Wolfe." When Fritz left, Wolfe lifted the envelope again, turning it under the light. No watermark, cheap imitation of authority, yet Miss Regan believed it genuine. Ergo, the deception was skilled. I said, "Could be someone inside the department, someone who knows what real memos look like." "Or someone who prints them," he said. "Find out who supplies the department's stationery. And consult Lon Cohen at the Gazette, discreetly. He will know how journalists circulate such documents." "That's 2 errands before lunch." "Indeed. I suppose I should thank Miss Regan for keeping me employed." "You may thank her by earning your wage." I got up, put on my hat, and paused at the door. By the way, she looked like she'd been proofread by lightning. "You sure you want me out there in that storm?" Wolfe's brow creased. "Archie, you will mind your tongue and your temperature. Charm is tolerable, indiscretion fatal." "Yes, sir. Anything else?" "Bring back facts, not impressions." I saluted. "I'll try, but impressions travel faster." His response was the traditional one-word benediction, "Pfui." I left him to brood. The brownstone quiet except for the faint hum of the elevator and the rustle of orchid leaves upstairs. Outside, the day was bright, the kind that made the city look almost innocent. But I'd been around too long to believe in innocent days, especially when publishers brought checks that smelled of fear and ink. Somewhere between the newsroom and the precinct, someone had mixed murder with politics. And Nero Wolfe, in his maroon robe and patience of granite, had just agreed to edit the truth. If you want to know what panic looks like in print, walk into a newsroom the morning after its editor gets murdered. The Metropolitan Chronicle's city desk had all the charm of a disturbed beehive. Reporters buzzing, phones ringing, cigarette smoke thick enough to slice. I've seen crime scenes with less nervous energy. I pushed through the chaos, gave my hat a reassuring tug, and introduced myself to the nearest typewriter jockey who looked like he might be in charge of oxygen. "Goodwin, private inquiry on behalf of your publisher." That got me a half-curious, half-suspicious glance. "You mean Miss Regan? She's upstairs, or hiding under the desk, depending who you ask." "Relax," I said. "I'm not from the tax office, just trying to make sense of last night's tragedy before it becomes tomorrow's editorial." He snorted. "Good luck." The Chronicle's offices sprawled across 2 floors of an old midtown building that had seen more lies per square foot than any political headquarters in the city. The smell was ink, paper, and fear, heavy on the fear. The late editor's name, Robert Leith, still hung in the air like a headline no one wanted to print. At the far end, under a brass sign reading Managing Editor, a man waved me over. Hal Dent, mid-30s, handsome in that slick ad-ready way with a suit that said Broadway columnist, and a smile that said, "Don't trust me near your wallet." He was running the show now, and he liked it. "Archie Goodwin," I said, shaking his hand. "I work for Nero Wolfe." Dent's eyebrows did a little dance. "The big man himself, huh?" I wondered how long it would take Miss Regan to call him. He usually doesn't come cheap. I smiled. Neither does a murder investigation. He gestured to a chair. "You want coffee? Scotch? Editorial sympathy?" "Coffee. Scotch later if it comes with confession." That got a grin. "We're all confessing today, to each other. The cops were here since dawn, turning over desks and egos. They didn't find much, but if you ask me, Leith knew too much." "Too much about what?" Dent leaned back, letting the smoke curl. "About Cramer. The word was he was protecting somebody. Internal affairs, political payoffs, you know the gossip. Maybe Leith was planning to print it. Maybe he shouldn't have." There it was, a name dropped like a match in a fireworks factory. I kept my face straight. And where would a newspaper get something like that? Psychic hotline. He laughed softly. "No, from our morgue, the archive. You'd be surprised what skeletons we keep down there. Files on every big case, every city official worth a comma, and half of them missing this morning." "Missing?" Gone. Pulled overnight. Whole drawer of back issues, the ones covering police bribery cases from 43 to 48. The night clerk swears he didn't see anyone. He never does. That smelled riper than Wolfe's cheese platter. I thanked Dent, promised to keep him out of print, and asked for directions to the morgue. The basement was dim, dusty, and shaped like the underside of a whale, long, low, and full of dead stories. Rows of file cabinets stretched into the shadows, labelled by year and headline category. A lonely fan stirred the air, scattering dust like old gossip. The night clerk was there, thin, grey-haired, and wearing the expression of a man perpetually waiting for the next fire drill. His name tag said Hank. "You're from the police?" he asked nervously. "Worst," I said. "Private sector." I slipped him a $5 bill. "Call it overtime." His fingers made the bill disappear like a magic trick. "Yeah, some drawers were tampered with," he said, nodding toward the back, particularly the 45 to 48 set. Someone pulled a lot of files on police corruption, the cases where they cleaned house after that gambling ring scandal. I opened the drawer marked Police, bribery cases, 1945-48. Half the folders were gone. The ones left behind had telltale dust outlines, as if someone had worked fast and sloppy. "You keep copies of everything?" I asked. "Usually, but that drawer was Leith's pet project. He'd been rechecking those old scandals, said he was writing a retrospective." "Retrospective, huh? The kind that gets you a eulogy." Hank didn't laugh. I made a quick note of the missing case numbers, 3 in particular that matched the dates in Regan's memo. Whoever had taken them had known exactly what to grab. Just as I was about to make a photostat, I heard the sound of shoes in the hallway, too soft for a janitor, too deliberate for chance. I closed the drawer, tucked my notes into my jacket, and walked out casual as you please. The corridor was empty except for a man standing by the service door, grey hat, tan coat, face polite enough to belong to a bank teller. "Lose something?" I asked. He blinked, then smiled faintly. "No, just waiting for someone." "Yeah? Maybe you should wait somewhere else. Basement's for the dead." He didn't answer. I took the stairs up to the main floor, detoured through the side exit, and caught a reflection in a window, grey hat following. Whoever he was, he hadn't come for the journalism. By the time I hit the street, the afternoon had gone thick and yellow, like bad soup. I headed east toward Bryant Park, walking slow enough to see if he'd match my pace. He did. I turned north, he turned north. West, same story. That's when I used a patented Goodwin maneuver. I slowed by a cab stand, pretended to check my watch, and as the next taxi rolled up, I yanked the rear door open and ducked in, but not all the way. As my friend hurried to follow, I waved him in like a polite host. When he reached for the handle, I slammed the door and shouted, "Police headquarters, and make it quick!" The cab shot off before he could decide whether to chase or faint. By the time we hit 6th Avenue, I looked back and saw nothing but a sea of hats. The grey one was gone. When I got back to the brownstone, it was 1:30. Lunch hour. Sacred territory. The smell of Fritz's sausages met me at the door like a religious experience. I found Wolfe at the table, fork in hand, conducting a private war with mustard. He didn't look up. "You are late, Mr. Goodwin." "I had company," I said. "Anonymous, grey hat, tail grade B+. Pfui. Sit." I did, and helped myself to a plate before Fritz could protest. Between bites, I gave him the lowdown. Dent's charm, the missing files, the memo connection, and my uninvited shadow. Wolfe listened without a sound, except for an occasional grunt of appreciation, directed at the sausages, not me. When I finished, he dabbed his lips with a napkin and spoke. "The press, forever the scavengers of corruption, yet blind to their own." "You think Dent's our rat?" "I think," he said, "that ambition and deceit make frequent bedfellows. Mr. Dent's sudden prominence following his employer's death is instructive." "Then maybe I should pay him another visit. Ask what he does for entertainment after homicide." "Not yet. You will instead ascertain his finances. Bank accounts, debts, recent purchases, discreetly. Have Saul Panzer assist you. Mr. Dent's prosperity may illuminate his virtue." "Saul'll love that. He thinks reporters are worse than pickpockets." "Reporters," Wolfe said dryly, "can smell a scandal from a mile away, usually because they caused it." I grinned. "I'll put that on their press passes." He leaned back, inspecting me with one of his slow nods that meant reluctant approval. Your evasion of pursuit, though reckless, was adequate. However, I suggest future subtlety. The next pursuer may not be incompetent." "I'm touched," I said. "You almost sounded worried." "I am worried," Wolfe replied. "About my lunch. You are distracting me." That ended the conversation, as final as a gavel strike. Fritz cleared the plates with his usual funereal efficiency. Wolfe took his beer in the chilled glass, glanced at me and said, "You will dine elsewhere this evening. I anticipate indigestion from proximity to printers." I got up. "You want me to call Lon Cohen at the Gazette? He might know who's been whispering about Cramer." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Do so, but remember, I prefer facts to gossip. And, Archie." "Yes, sir." "If the man in the grey hat reappears, do not improvise acrobatics in public thoroughfares. I dislike reading about you in the Chronicle." "Understood. If they print me at all, I'll make sure they spell your name right." He closed his eyes, signalling dismissal. I left him to his beer and his disdain for mankind. Outside the brownstone, the afternoon was cooling into early shadow. I flagged another cab, less dramatic this time, and headed uptown to start checking Dent's bank trail. Somewhere between newsroom gossip and basement drawers, someone had decided to rewrite history, and Leith had paid the editing fee in blood. If Wolfe was right, and that was as safe a bet as gravity, the corruption trail didn't end in police files. It ran straight through the people who printed them. There are few sounds in this world more tragic than Fritz announcing a soufflé at the exact moment the phone rings. He had just stepped out of the kitchen, proud as a parade marshal, balancing a creation that looked like it had been sculpted by angels on overtime. The phone chose that instant to shriek. Fritz stopped, eyes full of despair. "Mr. Goodwin?" Yeah, I hear it." I snatched the receiver before the soufflé could die of neglect. "Nero Wolfe's residence, Archie Goodwin speaking." A voice growled through static. "Archie, this is Pearlie. You better move. There's another stiff at the Chronicle, Hal Dent. Strangled." That popped the evening like a soap bubble. "When?" "Less than an hour ago. Get down here and bring your charm." "Charm costs extra," I said, but he'd already hung up. Behind me, Wolfe's voice rumbled from the dining room doorway. "You will not abandon dinner for another cadaver." "Sorry, but the cadaver's already upstaged the soufflé." "Archie." His tone could have flattened the meringue. "Fritz," I said, grabbing my hat. "Freeze that masterpiece. If I survive the night, we'll reheat it in triumph." I was out the door before Wolfe could summon the Constitution for backup. By the time I reached the Chronicle building, the night had wrapped the city in its favourite trench coat, dark, wet and nosy. Flashbulbs popped outside the revolving doors, painting cops, reporters and the occasional ghost of journalistic integrity. Upstairs, the newsroom was a carnival of chaos, desks overturned, typewriters mute, and the air thick with ink and curiosity. Pearlie Stebbins met me near the city desk, hat pushed back, coat collar up. He looked as if homicide had personally insulted his breakfast. "Glad you made it," he said. "Lieutenant Talbot's already inside, strutting." "Good," I said. "Maybe he'll break a heel." He led me through the crowd to Dent's office, a glass cubicle with the blinds half closed and a crowd of uniforms pretending to be busy. The stench of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume hung over everything like guilt. Hal Dent was behind his desk, head tilted at an angle that wasn't in any anatomy book, tie twisted into an obscene knot. His fountain pen lay crushed beside him, the ink bleeding into a blotter that had once been white. Talbot stood near the window, arms folded, posture perfect. He looked crisp enough to cut paper. "Goodwin," he said flatly, "you and your employer might want to lawyer up." "Good evening to you too, Lieutenant," I said. "You always this welcoming to visiting alumni?" "This isn't a social call. The deceased's notes mention Wolfe." He handed me a scrap of paper sealed in a plastic envelope. On it, in messy ink, "Wolfe, ask him why." "Touching," I said. "Maybe he wanted dietary advice." Talbot didn't bite. "Your boss was hired by Miss Regan. She's neck-deep in this, and now so are you. Don't leave town." I gave him my best innocent grin. "We're homebodies. Wolfe doesn't even leave the chair without a map." Pearlie snorted, earning a glare from his new superior. "Sir," he said quickly, "we still haven't found the weapon. Could be a cord, could be—" "Could be you focus on your job," Talbot snapped. Pearlie's jaw worked, but he held it. I caught his eye and saw the same thing I felt. Cramer's absence hung over this place like a missing heartbeat. I moved closer to the desk. Dent's face was grey under the harsh light, lips bluish, eyes half open like he'd seen the punchline coming too late. His suit was wrinkled, the knot mark deep, suggesting something narrow, maybe a tie or phone cord. Then I caught the scent again, lilac perfume, the same thin, expensive ribbon the Chronicle's publisher had worn in our office. I filed it under suspiciously fragrant evidence and leaned over the blotter. A page corner stuck out from beneath the paperweight, a torn piece of an old Chronicle memo header. On the reverse, faint pencil marks. I lifted it carefully and read 2 words, Internal Affairs. "Lieutenant," I said, "you might want to add irony to your evidence list." Talbot frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that Dent's been murdered twice, once by a killer, once by bad timing." "Enough," he barked. "Leave the wit for your obituary." Pearlie stepped between us. "All right, Lieutenant, I'll escort him out." Talbot hesitated, then nodded curtly and turned away. Pearlie exhaled like a man releasing a week's worth of restraint. "Thanks," I said. "Don't thank me. I'm not saving you. I'm saving the department from paperwork." As we left the glass office, Cramer appeared near the doorway. Not officially there, just there. No badge, no bluster, just a heavy overcoat and the look of a man whose pride had been confiscated. "Evening, Inspector," I said softly. He grunted. "Don't call me that. Not tonight." Old habits. He lit a cigar that wasn't lit long. The match died halfway, but he didn't notice. "They're making a circus out of it, Goodwin," he said, "and I'm the clown." I'd never seen him look small before. "Cramer, you're still the best ringmaster in town. Talbot's just juggling hot air." He managed half a smile. "Careful, you talk like that, you'll get drafted into morale duty." Already enlisted. We shook hands, a rare thing, and I left him there, framed in smoke, watching his old world crumble. Back at the brownstone, the lights were dimmed to Wolfe's preferred post-meal ambience, warm, steady, and smug. The air smelled of time and reproach. Wolfe was at his desk, dissecting both the sausage and the English language. "You were gone 2 hours," he said without looking up. "Explain." I gave him the rundown, skipping none of the unpleasant details. When I got to Talbot's threat and the paper scrap, he grunted. Ask him why, indeed. Insolent. He's past caring. Death excuses nothing. What else? The smell of lilac perfume. Same as Miss Regan's brand, unless there's a citywide shortage of originality. His brows arched. Perfume is a treacherous witness, abundant, indiscriminate, and often applied in excess. Do not leap. Leap? I'm just walking briskly. He allowed a faint, approving sound. Your restraint improves. The note? I handed him my transcription. He read it, frowned, and tapped his forefinger against the paper. So, the dead man links me by name, yet I never met him. That is either profound coincidence or deliberate provocation. Take your pick, I said. Cramer thinks it's the latter. Cramer? He was there, unofficially. Looked like he'd lost a war. Wolfe sighed. A pity. He is one of few men I would trust to despise me intelligently. That almost sounded like affection. I said, Talbot's convinced you're involved. You want me to call Cohen and spin a friendly paragraph before he makes it front page? No. Wolfe's tone snapped like a window shade. We do not court gossip. We bury it with facts. Fine. Then we dig some. The memo scrap had an internal affairs header. Matches the fake memo that killed Reagan's editor. He nodded slowly. Patterns emerge. The forgeries are bait. The death's consequence. Someone wished to ignite scandal, perhaps to destroy Inspector Cramer, perhaps to profit from chaos. Whoever it is, they're neat. They kill, plant perfume, and leave your name as a calling card. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. Audacity without intellect, the worst kind of enemy. I poured myself coffee. If flattery could kill, Dent had finally met his equal. That earned a glance, stern but not unfriendly. Archie, you are impertinent. Part of the job description. He tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared silently. Beer, Wolfe said, and a glass for Mr. Goodwin. That was new. He rarely shared the ritual. When Fritz returned, Wolfe filled both glasses. To what? I asked. To patience, he said. We shall await the corpse's posthumous eloquence. I clinked my glass lightly. If he starts talking, I'm changing professions. Do not jest, Archie. The dead speak through the living, and you will listen for them. Sure, I said. I'll tune in after breakfast. He ignored me, took a slow sip, and let his eyes drift toward the ceiling, where the orchid rooms waited for morning. The clock ticked, rain whispered against the windows, and the city outside kept its secrets, for now. The souffle, I remembered, was still waiting in the kitchen, and somewhere downtown, so was a killer with good taste in perfume. The bell rang at 5:42, the exact minute Fritz usually starts contemplating dinner, which meant it wasn't social. When I opened the door and saw Inspector Cramer on the stoop, hat low and shoulders sagging, I had to check if he'd come to arrest himself. "Evening, Inspector," I said. "Or should I call you civilian for the duration?" He grunted. "Don't start, Goodwin. I'm here to see Wolfe." "Sure you are. He'll be thrilled. He's been needing someone to argue with who can shout in complete sentences." I took his coat, which weighed about as much as his mood, and led him into the office. Wolfe was at his desk with a book open and a frown deep enough to store paper clips. He looked up, saw Cramer, and closed the volume carefully, as though civilization itself required proper page placement. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "you are unannounced." "Yeah," Cramer said, taking the red chair without being invited. "Get used to it. I don't have a precinct anymore to call ahead from." That landed like a dull hammer. Wolfe gestured toward the bell cord. "Beer, Fritz," Cramer scowled. "Make it 2. "You shall have one," Wolfe corrected. "My hospitality does not extend to indulgence." The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as tension concentrate. Fritz arrived with a tray, 2 chilled glasses, and the kind of expression a man wears when he suspects dinner will be late. Wolfe poured, handed Cramer one, and leaned back. "Well?" Cramer took a long pull before answering. "They set me up, Wolfe. Someone planted forged memos in my files, ones that look like I leaked internal affairs reports to the Chronicle. When the Dent murder hit, the commissioner didn't wait for explanations. My badge is sitting in a desk drawer, and I'm sitting in hell." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "You were investigating corruption." "Yeah, quietly. I had my men tracing payoffs inside the department. Bookmakers, patrol captains, a few high brass. I was closing in on a leak when this garbage appeared. Dent's murder turned suspicion into headlines." "Convenient," Wolfe said. "For someone." Cramer nodded grimly. "The copies the Chronicle had. Those came from me, Wolfe, or at least from my office. But I didn't give them out. Somebody broke chain of custody, and now I look like I've been feeding the press for years." I said, "If you ever did, you'd have picked a paper with better punctuation." That earned me a glare, but not the usual volcanic one. "Can the jokes, Goodwin. I'm tired." "Then you're scaring me," I said. "Seeing you polite is like watching a volcano take a nap." Wolfe cleared his throat. "Archie?" "All right, I'll pipe down." He turned back to Cramer. "You have, I presume, proof of this forgery." Cramer reached into his coat pocket and produced a folded document. The edges were creased, the signature at the bottom a perfect counterfeit. "That's one of the memos. The signature's supposed to be mine, but the type alignment's off, half a line higher than it should be. I had a copy machine expert check it. Says it's from a different platen roller than the one in my office." Wolfe accepted the paper delicately, holding it as if it might emit stupidity by touch. He read, eyes moving like clock hands. "Clumsy but effective. The signature fools the eye until examined. I assume you kept this out of departmental hands." "Yeah," Cramer said. "If Talbot gets it, I'm finished." "Lieutenant Talbot," Wolfe repeated with distaste. "A man who mistakes vigour for intellect. No doubt he already sharpens his teeth on your reputation." Cramer snorted. "He can have it. I just want the truth before they toss me out for good." That was the closest I'd ever heard to a plea from Cramer. Even Wolfe paused. The air in the room softened a shade. Wolfe set the paper down. "You, sir, are an intolerable nuisance," he said quietly, "but an honest one." Cramer blinked. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It was intended as such, though grudgingly. You have devoted your career to the Sisyphean labour of justice in a system allergic to it. For that, you are to be pitied, not condemned." "Save the eulogy," Cramer muttered. "Just tell me if you can help." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "If I expose the author of this forgery, I expose concomitantly the murderer of Mr. Dent. They are one and the same. I will assist, not for your sake." "Here it comes," I murmured. "But for justice, as I define it," Wolfe finished. Cramer's mouth twisted into something halfway between a smile and a wince. "I'll take it." Wolfe gestured toward me. "Mr. Goodwin will manage the practicalities. The press must not learn of your visit. Should Mr. Cohen at the Gazette inquire, he will be told nothing. Archie, you will ensure it." "Yes, sir." That was Wolfe's way of saying, guard him. And for a man who'd sooner debate philosophy than feelings, it was as protective as a hug. Cramer leaned back, weary. "I can't say I trust you, Wolfe, but I've run out of people I can trust less." "A prudent observation," Wolfe said. "Rest assured, I have no desire to see you publicly flayed. Your defeat would inconvenience me professionally. The department requires at least one opponent worthy of engagement." Cramer gave a dry laugh. "You know, you almost sound fond of me." "Phooey." He drained his glass and stood. "If you need me, I'll be at home pretending I'm not unemployed." Wolfe frowned. "You will not discuss this with anyone. Secrecy now is your only armour." "Don't worry. The paper's already buried me. They won't dig me up for a quote." He headed for the door. I followed him out, helped him with his coat. The man looked 10 years older than he had last week. "Hang in there, Inspector," I said. "If Wolfe takes your case, even hell's got to keep office hours." He grunted, which I took as gratitude, and left. When I returned, Wolfe was still staring at the forged memo. The lamp threw gold across his face, and for once he looked less like a mountain and more like a judge weighing humanity's appeal. "He's finished unless we act," I said. Wolfe didn't look up. "Then we shall act. But first, dinner. I think better nourished." I sighed. "So Cramer's future waits while you commune with Fritz's lamb chops?" "Precisely." I headed for the hall. "One of these days you'll starve your conscience to death." He almost smiled. "Nonsense. My conscience, like Fritz's soufflé, rises under heat." That was Wolfe's idea of reassurance. I left him to it, wondering which would be harder to resurrect, Cramer's career or the inspector's faith in justice. The next afternoon, after Wolfe had finished abusing the chicken fricassee and Cramer had gone, I started on the only lead that still smelled. The trouble with following perfume is that it doesn't know when to quit. By the time I tracked the scent to a shop off Lexington, I smelled like spring in a bad musical. The place was called L'Orchidée, which was one more insult to the boss's orchids. A bell chimed when I entered, releasing another cloud of lilac into the atmosphere. The clerk was a pale young fellow with hair slicked flatter than the counterglass. He sized me up as if I were there to steal the cash register or his comb. "Help you, sir?" "I hope so," I said. "I'm looking for a lady who bought this brand. Lilac. Strong enough to knock out traffic cops." I slid a sample handkerchief across the counter. He sniffed delicately. "Ah, Fleur de Syrinx. Imported. Expensive." "Everything worth trouble usually is. You sell much of it?" "Very little. 2 bottles this week, both to the same customer. Brunette, well-dressed, nervous hands." "Name?" He consulted his sales ledger with reverence. "Regan? Miss Claire Regan." I tried not to whistle. "And she paid cash?" He shook his head. "Signed the slip. Business account. Metropolitan Chronicle. Had it sent to her office. But she took 1 bottle herself." That bottle, I figured, had left its signature on a dead man's collar. I thanked him, bought a small vial for camouflage, and stepped back into the Manhattan wind. The city smelled better immediately. By 6 o'clock I had a lead and an empty stomach. Regan's car, a dark Packard I'd seen outside the Chronicle, turned up near a bar on East 49th, a joint called the Amber Room. It specialized in red leather, saxophone moans, and secrets whispered over highballs. I took a corner booth with a mirror view and ordered ginger ale, heavy on the ice, light on the suspicion. At 6:32, Regan walked in. She wore a black dress and a look that said she was 3 confessions behind schedule. A minute later, Lieutenant Talbot arrived. Same crisp grey suit, same haircut sharp enough to slice paper. He nodded to the waiter, took the opposite booth and leaned close. "Eavesdropping's an art, and I'm Picasso with a cocktail straw." Through the mirror, I caught their reflections clear as newsprint. "Joe, you promised this would stop," she said, voice low but sharp. "You've ruined Cramer, And now Dent's dead. Talbot's face didn't move. You're overwrought. Don't patronize me. You said it would just be pressure, a story to shake up the department, boost circulation. He stirred his drink. And it did. People love a scandal. Dent didn't. Talbot smiled thinly. He had a conscience. That's a liability in our business. Our business? I'm a publisher, Joe, not an executioner. Don't kid yourself, Claire. You print reputations into coffins every morning. That one hit her. I saw her hand tremble. I didn't want anyone hurt. Then you should have stuck to society weddings. He leaned closer. Listen to me. The memo was fake, a plant, but it worked. Cramer's finished, Wolfe's on the defensive, and the city's eating out of your paper's hand. So that's it, she whispered. You used me, he chuckled. Call it cooperation. Her voice dropped. If anyone learns we met, they won't. I decided that was my cue for an exit before Talbot's cop radar picked up my reflection. I left $1 for the ginger ale and eased out through the back corridor. Outside, the air smelled of wet asphalt and lilac ghosts. I found a payphone near the corner and dialed the brownstone. Fritz answered, polite, efficient, and already disapproving of the hour. Mr. Wolfe is dining, he said. Tell him it's urgent. A pause. Then Wolfe's voice, rich and annoyed. Yes? Archie here. Our client's perfume and her conscience just met Lieutenant Talbot at the Amber Room. They discussed faked memos, Dent's death, and your supposed involvement. Reagan's been feeding him stories to frame Cramer and sell papers. Silence then. So, the Hydra begins to show its heads. Continue. She claims she didn't mean for anyone to die. That is the anthem of the guilty. She looked scared, not crooked. Pfui. Fear and guilt are Siamese twins. Bring neither hysteria nor perfume into my office, Archie. Only facts. I smiled at the receiver. You wound me, sir. I'm all facts. Some of them even smell nice. I doubt it. You will return. We must chart the degrees of deceit, and I require my beer. That meant the orchid hours were over, and civilization could resume. When I reached the brownstone, it was past 7. Fritz met me with the air of a man shielding the sanctity of roast duck. You will not disturb Mr. Wolfe until after dinner. I'll take that under advisement, I said, and went straight to the office. Wolfe was at his desk, finishing the last inch of a cigar. The room was peaceful, books neat, globe glowing, the day's scandals politely excluded. You disobeyed Fritz, he observed. I'm developing initiative. He gestured for the report. I gave it in full, sparing no detail about the perfume, the mirror trick, or Talbot's bedside manner. When I finished, he leaned back, eyes closed. Miss Regan's complicity explains the department's zeal. Talbot uses her vanity as weapon and shield, yet she still fears exposure. Fascinating. Fascinating's one word for it. Felonious is another. Indeed. And the scent? Lilac. Same as we found on Dent. It ties her to the murder scene. Or to the forger, Wolfe said. She may have been present after death, not before. The perfume's presence proves only proximity, not guilt. Then what's our next move? He opened his eyes. We let her hang herself further. Tomorrow you will pay another visit to the Chronicle. Observe her subtly. If she trembles, note it. If she lies, record it. If she applies more perfume, open a window. You're all heart, I said. Heart is for surgeons. I deal in inference, I grinned. You know, that line'll kill at cocktail parties. Archie? Yes, sir? Silence. He tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared instantly, bearing the dinner tray like a priest with sacrament. Wolfe inhaled. Duck with orange. Excellent. Archie, attend me in 30 minutes. We shall outline this conspiracy. That's what I like about you, I said. Always time for murder and marinade. He allowed a faint smile. The two require equal delicacy. As Fritz withdrew, Wolfe poured himself beer into its frosted glass and lifted it slightly. To deceit, he said. It provides work. And to lilac, I added. It provides headaches. He grunted, which from Wolfe was a toast. Rain has a way of making New York look honest. Every light smeared, every shadow washed thin enough to show what's underneath. At 9:27 the phone rang again. Fritz was clearing the duck. Wolfe was lecturing the beer. I took it. Pearlie's voice said, Goodwin, your publisher's taken a dive off her own balcony. Get up to Park Avenue. I said I was on my way and told Wolfe, this one you can't schedule for tomorrow. He scowled but waved me out. By the time I reached Claire Regan's penthouse on Park Avenue, honesty was the last thing the night needed. The lobby buzzed like a wasp nest. Uniforms, flashbulbs, and reporters chasing rumours. I flashed my licence at a young cop who looked like he'd been issued yesterday. Goodwin, private operative, Miss Regan's associate. He frowned. You're late. Story of my life, I said, and took the elevator up. The penthouse doors were wide open, the carpet soaked by wet shoes and bad intentions. Inside, a chandelier trembled with every flash from the press photographers on the balcony. A sheet covered what was left of Claire Regan. Lieutenant Talbot stood near the railing, trenchcoat perfectly creased, expression perfectly void. If the man ever felt human emotion, he kept it on file. Don't tell me, I said. She slipped. He turned. That's the working theory. Sure it is. Women always step out for a breath of fresh air from the 23rd floor. Watch it, Goodwin. You're not cleared to be here. I'm allergic to clearance. I crouched by the railing. The metal gleamed under my flashlight, except for one small scratch where the varnish had been gouged. Something metallic had caught there recently. Talbot loomed over me. You're contaminating a crime scene. Then you admit it's a crime scene, I said. Progress. He didn't rise to it. Suicide. Case closed. Conveniently, I said. She just happens to die the day the Chronicle starts hinting the forged memos came from your division. That's timing even the tabloids can't fake. His eyes went flat. Careful, Goodwin. Accusing an officer of fabrication is slander. I straightened. Then sue me. I've been slandered by professionals. He brushed past me toward the balcony. Go home. Tell Wolfe to stop meddling. If I told Wolfe that, I said, I'd be the next one over the railing. An hour later, I was back at the brownstone, dripping rainwater and cynicism on Fritz's clean rug. Wolfe was in his chair, glowering at a newspaper headline that hadn't even cooled yet. Wolfe blackmails publisher, private detective tied to suicide scandal. Charming, I said, peeling off my coat. They gave me second billing. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. Illiterate jackals. Not illiterate enough. They spelled our names right. He pushed the paper aside. Report. I gave it all. The balcony, the scratch, Talbot's alibi, and the police wrapping it as suicide faster than Fritz wraps leftovers. When I finished, Wolfe's lids lowered halfway. A woman manipulated, then discarded. Tragic, but not accidental. Talbot had motive, I said. The fake memos came from his desk, his words, his game. Regan was his megaphone until she got loud. Indeed, Wolfe's voice sank deeper. And now she is silent. He tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared, immaculate as always. Beer, Wolfe said. And another for Mr. Goodwin, who looks as though he has been through a baptism of malice. I dropped into the red chair. Thanks. The choir was out of tune. Fritz departed. The rain drummed on the window like a soft accusation. Wolfe stared at the ceiling. Cramer telephoned while you were gone. Cramer? You mean our unemployed conscience? Do not deride him, Wolfe said sharply. He is more useful than a dozen Talbots. He has confirmed that the forgeries were produced within Internal Affairs itself. The paper stock, typeface, and ink formula match that division's stationery. So Talbot forged his own memo, fed it to Dent through Regan, and blamed Cramer. That's government efficiency for you. Precisely, but proof remains elusive. Maybe not. On my way out, while Talbot was busy performing grief for the uniforms, I took a longer look at the rail and palmed what the lab boys hadn't tagged. I reached into my pocket and produced a handkerchief. Inside was a small silver cufflink, its clasp bent, one edge bearing a fresh scratch. Found under the balcony rail. Wolfe took it, squinting. Not Miss Regan's, certainly. Not unless she wore French cuffs with black velvet. He turned it in the light, his eyes gleaming. You removed this? Temporarily. I made sure the lab boys saw it first. They're too busy framing Wolfe to care about evidence. He grunted, approval disguised as exasperation. Good. You will deliver it to Mr. Cramer, quietly. Next, he dictated a note for Saul. Internal Affairs, Lieutenant Talbot's office. Inspect his machine, retrieve any shavings or filings from recent repair. I phoned Saul. He grunted once, which in his language meant, "You'll have it by morning." "And have Saul confirm with the department tailor that these cufflinks are issue for lieutenant dress uniforms," he added. "I want the provenance tidy." I thought he was off duty. "He is off leash," Wolfe said, "and he will bite." Fritz returned with the beer. Wolfe poured it slowly, the foam precise as mathematics. A forged document, a fallen woman, and a lieutenant ambitious beyond prudence. The elements of farce, yet soaked in tragedy. I raised my glass. "If that was suicide, I'm the Queen of Denmark." He shot me a glance that almost qualified as affection. "You are insufferable, but alas, indispensable." That one landed. Wolfe rarely threw compliments unless he was trying to end a conversation on purpose. "Indispensable, huh? I'll have that engraved on the office door." He ignored me, gazing into the beer's amber depths like they contained philosophy. "Mr. Goodwin, men like Talbot believe power is its own virtue. They climb by deceit, then call it duty. Our task is to saw off the rungs beneath them, neatly." "Sure," I said. "I'll bring the hacksaw. You bring the vocabulary." "Enough." He rose, which meant the world was wobbling. "We hunt with intellect." "That's my second choice after bullets." Wolfe turned toward the elevator. "At 4 tomorrow, orchids. At 5, Mr. Cramer. You will prepare transcripts of all recent interviews. Accuracy, Archie. We are besieged by rumour. Let us not join the rabble." I started typing while he ascended to the plant rooms, the rhythmic click of the keys mixed with the rain, making the kind of music this city writes for funerals. I typed the line, "Claire Regan, deceased, cause disputed. Death inconvenient for many, final for one." Then I stopped, looked at the window, and wondered which of Talbot's polished lies would fall next. There are few things in life more dangerous than Nero Wolfe in a good mood. It means somebody else is going to have a bad day. At 10:30 that morning, the orchids were basking upstairs, and Wolfe was dictating to me like Caesar issuing edicts. Lon Cohen had called earlier, whispering in journalistic awe that the Gazette would print anything Wolfe wanted, provided it smelled like scandal. Wolfe obliged. "Take this down, Archie," he said, eyes half closed, voice pure marble. "Nero Wolfe, acting in the interests of justice, now possesses documentary evidence concerning the death of Miss Claire Regan. The material will be shared in due course with the proper authorities." I typed it fast. "That's not a statement, that's bait with garnish." "Precisely." He leaned back. "Truth, Archie, is dull. Implication is irresistible." Lon Cohen arrived an hour later, notebook twitching. "Wolfe, this'll set the city on fire." "That is not my intention," Wolfe said mildly. "Merely illumination." "Sure," Lon said, grinning. "I'll make sure it lands front page. You'll owe me a steak dinner." "I owe no man meat," Wolfe replied, "but you may have Fritz's gratitude in soufflé form." Lon left, chuckling, and I watched Wolfe watching the clock, a rare hobby. At 3:14 p.m., the Gazette's afternoon edition hit the stands. By 3:40, the phone rang. I picked it up. "Nero Wolfe's office, Archie Goodwin speaking. If this is the Pulitzer Committee, call back after dinner." "This is Lieutenant Talbot," came the voice tight and sharp. "Tell Wolfe I want to meet now." I looked at Wolfe. He mouthed, "Invite him to hang himself." "Sure thing," I said. "Bring your halo, we're fresh out." He hung up without a goodbye. "Hook, line, and lieutenant," I said. You could almost hear the trapdoor creak, Wolfe murmured. "Mr. Goodwin, summon Mr. Cramer. His presence will provide ballast." Cramer arrived 15 minutes later, trench coat dripping, cigar unlit but itching to be. "You better have a damn good reason, Wolfe," he growled. "Talbot's been strutting like a peacock since dawn." "Sit, Inspector," Wolfe said. "You may witness his final molt." When Talbot came through the door, the room changed temperature. He'd polished his shoes, his badge, and his arrogance. "You're making a mistake, Wolfe," he said without sitting. "Publishing that statement was obstruction." "Rubbish," Wolfe said. "It was journalism, a field you and your allies seem fond of exploiting." Cramer gave a short grunt of amusement. Talbot's gaze flicked to him. "You don't belong here, Cramer. You're suspended." "And you," Cramer said, "are talking out of a job." I coughed delicately. "Gentlemen, if we could keep the insults alphabetized—" "Archie," Wolfe interrupted. "Let him proceed. Psychological lubrication." That earned me a glare from Talbot, which I accepted graciously. "I came," Talbot said, "because you claim to have Regan's notes. They're department property. Hand them over." "I claim nothing," Wolfe said. "The Gazette does." Talbot's jaw worked. "You planted that story." "Indeed, and you believed it." He took a step closer. "You're playing with fire." "Not at all," Wolfe said, "merely with a match and a gas leak." Cramer shifted his cigar. "Cut the riddles. If there's evidence, let's see it." "There is none," Wolfe said calmly. "The lady's notes were destroyed." Talbot blinked. "Destroyed? How do you know that?" "I did not, until now." Wolfe's voice went silky. "Your statement, Lieutenant, we cleaned her place, confirms it." For one glorious second the room froze. Then Cramer let out a low, satisfied whistle. "You just confessed to tampering with a scene, Talbot." Talbot's face drained of colour. "You're twisting my words." "Not at all," Wolfe said. "I have merely wound them back to their origin. You entered Miss Regan's apartment before authorization, removed incriminating material, and fabricated reports to frame Inspector Cramer. Am I mistaken?" "Damn right you are," Talbot snapped. "You can't prove any of that." "I can infer it," Wolfe said. "An inference, Lieutenant, is the prelude to proof." Talbot turned to Cramer. "You going to let him smear me like this?" Cramer struck his match, lit the cigar, and took his time. "You dug your own hole, Talbot. I'm just admiring the depth." Talbot pointed at me. You were at Regan's place. Did you see me there?" "Sure," I said pleasantly. "And I saw Santa Claus too. You're both equally real." Wolfe's lips twitched. "Archie?" "Yes, sir?" "Less embroidery." "Right. Sorry. Habit." Talbot turned back to Wolfe. "You'll regret this." "I rarely regret accuracy," Wolfe said. "But you will regret presumption." He reached for the bell cord. Fritz appeared like a well-timed Deus Ex kitchen. "Beer," Wolfe ordered. 3 glasses. "I'm not drinking," Talbot snapped. "Then abstain. Your refusal will not halt civilization." Cramer took a glass and leaned back. "You know, Talbot, I think the Commissioner's going to like hearing you admit you cleaned her place. Might even print you a medal, posthumous to your career." Talbot swallowed hard, then tried for a sneer. "You think you've trapped me? The department closes ranks." "Against truth?" Wolfe asked. "How noble." He lifted his glass, the foam catching light like gold judgment. "Lieutenant, you mistake loyalty for license. You have misused both." Talbot slammed a hand on the desk. "You can't prove anything." Wolfe didn't flinch. "Proof is forthcoming, Mr. Goodwin." "Yes, boss." "Escort the lieutenant out, then telephone Saul Panzer. He will deliver our transcription of this conversation to Commissioner Bowen. Immediately." Talbot froze. "Transcription?" I tapped the typewriter. "Carbon copy, Lieutenant. You've been recorded at 60 words per minute." Cramer barked a laugh that could have cracked plaster. "Beautiful, Wolfe. I'll stand witness to every line." Talbot's bravado wilted. He looked at me, then at Cramer, then back at Wolfe, who sat perfectly still, eyes half closed, the faintest smile playing beneath them. "This isn't over," Talbot muttered. "Indeed," Wolfe said. "It is only beginning, for you." He left without another word, the door slamming like punctuation. Cramer exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. "You magnificent fat devil, you just handed me my badge back." "Phooey," Wolfe said. "I merely cleaned your department, not your conscience." Cramer grinned. "I'll take it anyway." He left on that line, and the room settled. The orchids upstairs seemed to hum faintly, as if applauding. Wolfe drained his glass. "Archie, remove the transcript from your typewriter, make 3 copies and lock them in the safe. Then for heaven's sake, eat dinner. Your face is the colour of wasted youth." "I'll take that as affection," I said. "Take it as instruction." He leaned back, eyes closing. "Our quarry wriggles, but the snare holds." "And tomorrow?" I asked. "Tomorrow, we tighten it." If justice had a tuxedo, Nero Wolfe just tailored it. That thought hit me about 3 seconds after he pulled the final string and the whole web started to shake. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The brownstone had never looked more formal, or more loaded for detonation. Wolfe had arranged the furniture like a stage set. Cramer to his right, arms folded and cigar unlit. Pearly Stebbins to his left, chewing invisible nails. Lon Cohen perched near the window with his reporter's pad trembling for history. At the far end sat Lieutenant Talbot, shoulders squared, face polished to bureaucratic smugness. Wolfe, of course, was centre stage, immovable behind the desk, a mountain in a gold tie. I was leaning on the corner of my own desk, notebook in hand, ready to catch the fallout. "Gentlemen," Wolfe began, and that one word already had the authority of a gavel. "You have all assembled here, some by summons, some by conscience, to hear the truth. It will neither flatter nor entertain." Cramer grunted. "Just make it stick." Wolfe inclined his head. "It will." He reached for the envelope on the blotter, the one that had spent the morning in his safe, and opened it with surgical calm. "Here is the counterfeit memorandum. Its signature, allegedly Inspector Cramer's, was imitated from departmental carbon copies. The type alignment, however, exposes its forgery. You may note the upward drift of the T in integrity, a mechanical defect of the Internal Affairs typewriter, Lieutenant Talbot's typewriter." All eyes swung to Talbot. He smiled thinly. "You can't prove that." "I need not. The machine will." Wolfe gestured toward a small metal fragment lying beside the page. "As I instructed Mr. Panzer last night, your office machine was examined. A type bar shaving was recovered from your floor, the same defect that lifts the T in integrity." Talbot's lips tightened. "That proves nothing." "Phooey." Wolfe's voice carried more scorn than a courtroom transcript. "Add to that the cufflink found beneath Miss Regan's balcony rail, its monogram identical to the pair you wear only on duty dinners. Your department tailor confirms as much." Cramer exhaled smoke through his nose. "That cufflink came from your wrist, Lieutenant, unless you've got a twin with lousy taste." Pearlie growled low. "We can check prints." Talbot's jaw twitched. "Circumstantial." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "As was Miss Regan's death, until your own words betrayed you yesterday. We cleaned her place. That, sir, was your confession." The room went still enough to hear the radiator sigh. I watched Talbot's collar glisten. "You're twisting my report," he said. "No," Wolfe murmured. "I am restoring it to its natural shape. You, Lieutenant, engineered a sequence of events as audacious as it was asinine. You forged departmental records to imply corruption under Inspector Cramer. You fed those to the Chronicle through Miss Regan, who, intoxicated by influence, printed what she half believed. When the editor, Mr. Dent, discovered the forgery and threatened exposure, you silenced him. When Miss Regan's panic made her dangerous, you silenced her too, permanently. Both victims of your careerism. Your crime, like your ambition, was pedestrian yet profitable, until today." Talbot shot to his feet. "That's conjecture." Wolfe didn't move a millimetre. "That is deduction. The distinction lies in evidence, not volume." Cramer's cigar flared. "He's right, Talbot. I've got enough here to keep the DA busy till spring." Pearlie stepped forward. "You want to make it easy, Lieutenant, or do I?" Talbot's hand twitched toward his pocket, and I took a step, ready. He didn't pull a gun. He lunged for me instead, fast and stupid. I sidestepped and caught his wrist, but he had the weight advantage. We grappled for a second before Pearlie came barreling in, grabbing Talbot like a sack of coal and slamming him into the chair. Papers scattered. Wolfe didn't blink except to tug the bell cord. Fritz appeared instantly, as unruffled as if requested for sauce, not scandal. "Yes, sir?" "Call the precinct. Inform them Lieutenant Talbot is detained for attempted assault and obstruction of justice." "Yes, sir." Fritz vanished, calm as a Swiss clock. Talbot twisted under Pearlie's grip. "You can't hold me. You're framing me with parlor tricks and rhetoric." Cramer leaned in, eyes cold. "You tried to hang me with forgeries, Lieutenant. Wolfe's just giving you a cleaner rope." Lon Cohen scribbled furiously. "This is dynamite," he muttered. "The Gazette'll—" Wolfe snapped. "Mr. Cohen." The single word froze him mid-sentence. "You will print nothing until I release a verified statement. This is not spectacle. It is justice." Lon gulped. "Understood." Wolfe turned back to Talbot. "Do you wish to deny possession of Miss Regan's ledger?" "What ledger?" "The one she kept privately. Entries detailing every meeting, payment, and leak. She hid it behind a false back in her desk drawer. Mr. Panzer retrieved it after you cleaned her place." Talbot blinked, then laughed too loudly. "You're bluffing." I dropped the small black notebook on the desk. It landed like a verdict. "Read the last entry," Wolfe ordered. I flipped it open. Meeting with JT, says Cramer must fall, warned him Dent suspects. JT promises protection, perfume to cover nerves. Cramer's lips twisted. That's enough for me. Wolfe folded his hands. And for me. Lieutenant Talbot, you are undone by the same vanity that propelled you. You mistook ambition for immunity. Talbot's shoulders slumped. For the first time, he looked small enough to fit inside his uniform. Pearlie hauled him upright, snapping cuffs with the efficiency of a man tying ribbon on a gift. All right, Lieutenant, you're coming with me. You can tell the desk sergeant how you cleaned up this mess. As Pearlie escorted him out, Talbot threw one last glance over his shoulder. You think this fixes everything, Wolfe? The department's still rotten. Wolfe's tone was iron. Rot is inevitable, Lieutenant. It is the gardener's task to prune it before it spreads. When the door shut, Wolfe let out a deep breath that might have been mistaken for relief, if you didn't know him. Cramer stood watching the empty doorway, cigar burning down to an ember. Well, I'll be damned, he said finally. You did it. You actually cleared my name. I did nothing of the sort, Wolfe replied. You cleared your own by enduring suspicion with dignity. I merely unveiled the scoundrel. Yeah, well, Cramer said, managing half a smile, I'll buy the first round anyway, and I don't even like you. Nor I you, Wolfe said gravely, yet our antipathy is civilized. That, in this city, is near friendship. Cramer barked a laugh and headed for the door. You're a piece of work, Wolfe. Goodwin. Remind him people don't talk like that outside his living room. Sure, I said, but then they don't solve murders either. He grunted and left. The silence afterward felt earned. Wolfe leaned back, closing his eyes. Archie, beer. I obliged, pouring it from the chilled bottle Fritz had left on standby. He took the glass and raised it slightly. To Mr. Cramer, he said. A vexing man, but honest. And to Pearlie, I added, for demonstrating gravity on a living object. Wolfe's mouth twitched. Humour, Mr. Goodwin, is not analysis. Maybe not, but it's better for digestion. He sipped. Your conduct was adequate. High praise, I said. Anything above barely tolerable and I'd need a tuxedo. He regarded me over the rim of his glass. Do not be absurd. Your impudence, Archie, is the yeast of triumph. Without it, my intellect would stagnate. Thanks, I said. I think. He gestured at the pile of evidence on the desk. Lock it in the safe, then send a concise statement to Mr. Cohen. Lieutenant Talbot confessed by deed, if not by word. The department is cleansed. Justice prevails. Catchy, I said. You could headline for the Gazette. Phooey, my prose is for truth, not circulation. I gathered the papers, cufflink and ledger, filed them neatly, and closed the safe. Outside, the last light of dusk brushed the brownstone windows. The city was still roaring, still corrupt, but for once we'd trimmed its worst limb. Fritz appeared quietly. Dinner is served. Excellent, Wolfe said. Roast capon? Indeed. Then civilization resumes. He stood, slow but steady. Archie, after dinner, you will telephone Mr. Pantzer and Mr. Durkin. Convey my commendation. I followed him to the dining room. Want me to tell them they're part of the yeast too? Goodwin. Yes, sir? Silence. That was fair. We ate in peace, Fritz's capon making its usual argument for divine intervention. Afterward, Wolfe retired to the orchids, muttering something in Latin that probably translated to "fooey on bureaucracy." I went to my desk, typed up the day's notes and read them over once. It wasn't poetry, but it was clean. Outside, the city kept humming, half asleep, half crooked. Inside, the brownstone smelled of coffee, orchids, and vindication. If Wolfe ever decided to run the world, I'd volunteer to take dictation, but only after lunch. There's a particular kind of peace that settles over the brownstone after a case has died a natural death. Not the police kind of death, paperwork, press conferences, and scapegoats, but the Wolfe kind, all threads tied, all villains caught, and all tempers cooling at their own pace. 3 days after Talbot's arrest, the house had gone back to its natural order, Wolfe in his chair, orchids humming upstairs, Fritz rearranging perfection in the kitchen, and me trying to look busy enough to justify my paycheck. At precisely 7:20 on that third evening, the bell rang. Now, the bell in our brownstone doesn't ring like an ordinary bell. It announces. Most visitors ring it once, uncertainly, as if afraid they might disturb civilization. This ring had the authority of a man who carried warrants in his pocket and didn't mind using them. I got up from my desk. "I'd bet my week's pay that's Cramer," I said. Wolfe didn't look up from the book on his lap, something in Latin that probably meant how to be intolerable in 10 easy lessons. "You have already been paid for the week, Archie. Do not gamble retroactively." "Then I'll wager your dignity," I said, heading for the door. "That, sir, is inalienable." He was right, as usual. When I opened the door, Inspector Cramer stood there, coat unbuttoned, cigar already lit. He looked about 10 pounds lighter and 10 years older, which meant justice had done its usual trick of helping nobody's complexion. "Evening, Goodwin," he said gruffly. "Your boss in?" "He's vertical and breathing," I said. "That's as in as he gets. Come on in." He stepped inside, bringing with him the smell of rain and police precinct tobacco. Under his arm was a small box wrapped in brown paper. He looked like a man delivering his own ransom. Wolfe didn't rise. He just set down the book and raised one eyebrow. "Inspector," Cramer grunted. "You can relax, Wolfe. I'm not here on business." He put the box on the edge of Wolfe's desk. "Call it a peace offering." Wolfe stared at it as if it might explode. Peace is rarely packaged. "Open it." I did the honours, peeling back the paper to reveal a box of imported cigars, the kind that smelled like they'd been aged in congressional hypocrisy. Wolfe sniffed, displeased. Dominican. How patriotic. Cramer took the chair opposite him. "Don't let it go to your head, Wolfe. You didn't save my badge. You just ruined Talbot's career faster than internal affairs could." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "I do not meddle in careers. I expose stupidity. Your reinstatement was incidental." Cramer puffed his cigar, scowling. "You'd make a lousy priest. No grace in you." "I detest sanctimony," Wolfe said. "It interferes with digestion." That broke the tension about as effectively as a small earthquake. I poured coffee for myself and took a seat, letting the two old warhorses circle each other. Cramer glanced at me. "You still working for this egomaniac, Goodwin?" "I tried honest labour once," I said. "Didn't suit my wardrobe." That earned me a snort from him and a glare from Wolfe, which I counted as a win. Cramer leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "All jokes aside, Wolfe, I'll say it plain. You were right. The department was rotting from the top, and I couldn't smell it over the cigars. So, thanks." Wolfe looked as startled as if someone had recited poetry at a firing squad. "Your gratitude is unnecessary." "Yeah, well," Cramer said, tapping ash into the tray, "that's the only kind I've got." For a full 30 seconds nobody spoke. The only sound was Fritz in the kitchen doing something complicated to saucepans. Wolfe broke the silence first. "If I were sentimental, Inspector, I might express contentment." "Spare me," Cramer said. "You don't do sentimental." Wolfe's lips twitched. "Correct. And yet, justice in this instance produced a satisfactory flavour." "Pfui," Cramer said, borrowing the word almost affectionately. "You and your flavours. You know what justice tastes like to me? Cold coffee and late reports." "Then you should improve your palate," Wolfe said smoothly. Cramer laughed, a short, genuine bark that made the air feel lighter. "I'll leave that to you. You and your beer and orchid diet." He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. "Don't think this means we're friends." "Perish the thought," Wolfe said. "Your head, sir, is quite sufficient for both of us." Cramer blinked, then actually grinned. "You're insufferable." "I strive for consistency." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Goodwin?" "Yeah?" "You ever get tired of babysitting him? The department could use a man with your kind of sarcasm." "Thanks," I said, "but I'm too fond of regular meals and indoor plumbing." That got another laugh out of him. "Figures." He headed out, pulling the door shut behind him. When the latch clicked, Wolfe exhaled deeply and muttered, "Phooey to politics." "Phooey indeed," I said. "But it's nice when the right guy gets his desk back." He ignored that, which was standard procedure when sentiment dared to enter the room. Instead, he rang the bell cord. Fritz appeared within moments, as if summoned from a different dimension. "Yes, sir?" "Beer," Wolfe said, "and a light supper. Justice has dulled my appetite." "Yes, sir." As Fritz disappeared again, Wolfe leaned back and closed his eyes. The tension that had been sitting behind his frown all week finally dissolved molecule by molecule. The big man looked, well, if not happy, then at least composed in a way only vindication could produce. I poured myself another cup of coffee. "So," I said, "are we ever getting paid for this civic contribution? Or should I start charging for autographs from honest cops?" Wolfe opened one eye. "You are mercenary, Archie." "Only when breathing." He grunted. Justice was its own retainer, but I expect a gratuity in silence. "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said, "you will refrain from regaling Mr. Cohen with romanticized versions of this case. The Gazette already suffers from chronic exaggeration." I held up a hand. "Cross my heart, but if Lon asks, I'll tell him you wept with joy." Wolfe's eyes snapped open. "Archie." "Relax," I said. "No one would believe it anyway." That earned me a glare sharp enough to trim orchids. Fritz returned with the beer and a tray of sandwiches that looked too elegant for their own good. Wolfe poured, sipped, and sighed, a sound that from him was equivalent to applause. "Archie," he said finally, "your impudence is ceaseless." "It keeps me young. It keeps me irritated." "Which," I said, "keeps you alive. We're a perfect system." He closed his eyes again, conceding by silence. Outside, Manhattan was humming its eternal nocturne, taxi horns, rain on stone, and the low thrum of a city pretending it didn't care who'd been right. Inside, the brownstone felt like the last honest place left standing. I looked over at Wolfe, the beer glass shining in his hand, his features softened by the amber light. He was half asleep, half victorious, the picture of self-contained glory. If Wolfe ever wrote a thank you note, I'd frame it as a miracle. Instead, I did what passed for ritual. I got up, turned off the desk lamp, and let the shadows settle. "Good night, boss," I said. He didn't open his eyes. "Good night, Archie. Do lock the door. I have no further patience for guests, friendly or otherwise." "Right," I said. "If Cramer comes back, I'll tell him we've taken up politics." "Phooey." The elevator whirred softly as he rose toward the orchids. I watched the doors close behind him, the sound fading like the final period on a long, complicated sentence. The office was quiet again, the kind of quiet you don't buy. You earn it after weeks of shouting, scheming, and near misses. I sat for a while, listening to the rain outside. Somewhere uptown, Cramer was probably lighting one of those cigars and pretending it didn't taste like humility. Somewhere else, a new scandal was already brewing. But for tonight, the world was balanced. Justice had been served, on Wolfe's terms, naturally, and for once, even I couldn't argue. I turned out the lights and headed upstairs, thinking that in a city where everything changes faster than a headline, the brownstone was the one place that never did. And maybe that was the real miracle.